Maya Rodriguez pushed her cleaning cart down the pristine marble hallway of Nexus Technologies, her swollen belly making every step a careful calculation. At 7 months pregnant, the late-night cleaning shifts were becoming increasingly difficult. But she couldn't afford to lose this job. Not when the baby was coming in just 2 months, and not when her husband Carlos was still recovering from the construction accident that had left him unable to work. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The 42nd floor of the downtown Seattle skyscraper hummed with the quiet efficiency of a company that never truly slept. Even at 11 p.m., several offices still glowed with the blue light of computer screens, their occupants hunched over keyboards, lost in lines of code that Maya couldn't begin to understand. She had been cleaning these offices for 3 years, now invisible to most of the software engineers and executives who barely acknowledged her presence. Maya paused outside the corner office, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of Elliott Bay. The nameplate on the door read, David Chen, Chief Executive Officer, in sleek silver letters. She had cleaned this office countless times, always when it was empty, always careful not to disturb the perfectly arranged desk or the expensive gadgets that seemed to multiply each week. Tonight was different. The office was occupied. Through the glass walls, she could see David Chen himself, his dark hair disheveled from running his hands through it, his usually immaculate shirt wrinkled and tie loosened. Even from a distance, Maya could sense his frustration. Papers were scattered across his desk, and he was speaking rapidly into his phone, his free hand gesturing emphatically. Maya had seen David Chen before, of course. He was impossible to miss when he walked through the office, his presence commanding attention from every employee they passed. At 35, he had built Nexus Technologies from a small startup into a billion-dollar enterprise, and his success had earned him a reputation as both a visionary and, according to office gossip, a demanding perfectionist who had little patience. For incompetence, she hesitated at his door, debating whether to come back later. Her supervisor, Janitor, had been clear about the schedule. All executive offices needed to be cleaned before the morning shift arrived. No exceptions. Maya knocked softly on the door frame, hoping to get his attention without startling him. David looked up from his phone call, his sharp brown eyes focusing on her with an expression of mild annoyance. He held up one finger, indicating she should wait, and continued his conversation. "I don't care what the other firms are charging," he said into the phone, his voice carrying the edge of exhaustion and frustration. "We've been dealing with this system failure for 10 years. 10 years, Marcus. Every consulting company we've hired has given us the same runaround. The same expensive Band-Aid solutions that last maybe 6 months before everything crashes again." Maya stood quietly by the door, her hands resting on her cart. She couldn't help but overhear his conversation, and something about his words sparked a familiar recognition in her mind. System failures, crashes, expensive solutions that didn't work. It reminded her of something, though she couldn't quite place what. "The client portal keeps corrupting data every time we try to integrate new features," David continued, his voice rising slightly. "We lose customers every quarter because of it. Do you know how much revenue we've hemorrhaged because of this piece of garbage legacy system?" Maya's eyes widened slightly. She knew about legacy systems, about data corruption during integration. It was a problem she had encountered years ago, in what felt like another lifetime. David ended his call with a sharp goodbye and looked up at Maya with tired eyes. "Sorry about that. Go ahead and do what you need to do." Maya nodded and began her routine, emptying the wastebaskets, dusting the surfaces, and vacuuming the carpet. She worked quietly, efficiently, the way she had learned to work in all the offices. Be invisible, be quick, be thorough. As she worked, David returned to his computer, pulling up what appeared to be system diagnostics and error logs. Maya couldn't help but glance at the screen as she dusted nearby surfaces. The error messages looked familiar, almost identical to ones she had seen years ago when she worked as a junior software developer at a much smaller company. That had been before Carlos, before the pregnancy, before life had taken her down a different path. She had a computer science degree from the University of Washington, had even spent 2 years working for a small tech firm before budget cuts had eliminated her position. When she couldn't find another development job quickly enough, she had taken the cleaning position at Nexus as a temporary solution. 3 years later, temporary had become permanent, and her coding skills had grown rusty from disuse. But looking at David's screen, something clicked in her mind. The error patterns, the way the system was failing during integration processes, it all looked remarkably similar to a problem she had solved years ago. Maya finished dusting and moved to empty David's wastebasket. As she lifted the liner, a crumpled piece of paper fell out and rolled across the floor. She bent down to retrieve it, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward and slow. "Careful there," David said, glancing up from his screen. His tone wasn't unkind, but there was a hint of impatience in it. "Don't hurt yourself." Maya straightened up with the paper in her hand, and as she did, she caught a clear view of his computer screen. The code displayed there made her heart skip a beat. It was a database integration script, and she could immediately see the problem. There was a race condition in the data validation process, causing corruption when multiple processes tried to access the same record simultaneously. Without thinking, she spoke up. "Excuse me, Mr. Chen?" David looked up surprised. In 3 years of cleaning his office, Maya had never initiated a conversation with him. "The problem with your client portal," she said, her voice hesitant but growing stronger. "I think I can see what's causing the data corruption." David's eyebrows rose slightly, and for a moment he seemed too surprised to respond. Then a small smile played at the corners of his mouth, not entirely friendly. "I'm sorry," he said, his tone polite but dismissive. "Did you just say you know what's wrong with our client portal system?" Maya felt her cheeks flush, but she pressed on. "I used to work in software development. I know it's not my place, but I couldn't help noticing the error patterns on your screen, and I think—" David's smile widened, and he let out a short laugh. "You used to work in software development?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her with amusement. "And now you're here, cleaning offices at 11 p.m. while you're 7 months pregnant?" The condescension in his voice was unmistakable, and Maya felt her face burn with embarrassment and anger. She had encountered this attitude before, the assumption that because she was now a janitor, she couldn't possibly understand anything about technology. "I know how it sounds," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I really do think I can help. The race condition in your data validation process—" "Race condition," David interrupted, his laugh becoming more pronounced. "Listen, I appreciate that. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "Initiative, really I do. But we've had teams of senior developers from some of the best consulting firms in the country looking at this problem. Engineers with decades of experience, advanced degrees from MIT and Stanford, and you think you've spotted something they all missed while emptying my trash can." Maya felt tears prick at her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I understand why you'd think that, but if you'd just let me show you—" "Show me." David stood up from his chair, his amusement turning into something sharper. "What exactly are you going to show me? How to debug enterprise-level software with a mop and some cleaning supplies?" The cruelty in his words hit Maya like a physical blow. She had faced dismissal and condescension before, but never quite so. "Cutting? never from someone she had to face regularly in her work environment. "I just thought," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "maybe a fresh perspective might help." David shook his head, still smiling that cold smile. "A fresh perspective, right?" He gestured toward her cleaning cart. "I think your perspective is better suited to what you're already doing. Leave the software engineering to the software engineers." Maya nodded quickly, blinking back tears as she returned to her cart. Her hands shook slightly as she gathered her supplies, the humiliation burning in her chest like acid. She had been foolish to speak up, foolish to think that her opinion might matter to someone like David Chen. "Hey!" David called out as she prepared to leave. Maya turned back, hoping perhaps that he had reconsidered, that he might be willing to listen after all. "Make sure you get the windows tomorrow night," he said, already turning back to his computer. "There are fingerprints on the glass." Maya nodded mutely and pushed her cart out of the office, her vision blurred with unshed tears. Behind her, she could hear David already back on another phone call, probably telling someone about the pregnant janitor who thought she could fix their $1 million software problem. As she made her way down the hallway to the next office, Maya's mind raced with hurt and anger, but underneath those emotions, something else was building. The problem she had seen on David's screen wasn't just familiar, she was absolutely certain. She knew how to fix it. The race condition was clear as day to her, and the solution was actually relatively simple, something that could be implemented in a few hours rather than the months of expensive consulting that David seemed resigned to. But he had made it clear that her input wasn't welcome, that her background and current circumstances disqualified her from having anything valuable to contribute. Maya continued her work, cleaning office after office, but her mind kept returning to that code on David's screen, to the solution that she could see so clearly but would never be allowed to share. 3 floors down, in the server room that she cleaned twice a week, Maya knew there was a terminal that developers sometimes used for emergency access. She had seen them working there during her rounds, typing commands that she still remembered from her own coding days. As she cleaned around the servers, her eyes kept drifting to that terminal. An idea was forming in her mind, dangerous and probably foolish, but growing stronger with each passing minute. If David Chen wouldn't listen to her explanation, maybe she could show him instead. Maybe she could prove that a pregnant janitor could indeed understand something that had stumped his expensive consultants. The security cameras in the server room had been malfunctioning for weeks, something she had heard the IT staff complaining about. If she was careful, if she was quiet, maybe she could access the system and implement the fix she knew would work. It would be a violation of company policy, probably grounds for immediate termination. But the possibility of proving herself right, of showing David Chen that he had been wrong to dismiss her so cruelly, was becoming irresistible. Maya finished her cleaning rounds for the night, but instead of heading home as she usually did, she made her way back to the server room. Her heart pounded as she approached the terminal, her hands shaking slightly as she powered it up. She had been thinking about the problem all night, and she was more convinced than ever that she knew the solution. The login screen appeared and Maya hesitated. What she was about to do could destroy her life, cost her the job she desperately needed, potentially even result in criminal charges if the company decided to press them. But the memory of David's mocking laughter, his dismissive cruelty, pushed her forward. She had spent 3 years being invisible, being dismissed, being treated as less than. For once, just once, she wanted to prove that she was more than what people assumed she was. Maya began to type. The next morning, David Chen arrived at his office earlier than usual, still grappling with the same system failures that had kept him up until nearly 2 a.m. The client portal had crashed again overnight, corrupting another batch of customer data and triggering a flood of angry emails from affected clients. He had a board meeting at 10, and he was dreading having to explain yet again why the company's core system remained unreliable after years of expensive attempts to fix it. His assistant, Jennifer, was already at her desk when he arrived, her usually calm demeanor showing signs of stress. "How bad is it?" David asked, not bothering with pleasantries. "Bad," Jennifer replied, handing him a stack of printed emails. 63 customers affected by last night's crash. Marcus from the consulting firm is on his way up to discuss next steps, and the board is asking for a full report on the system. Failures for this morning's meeting. David cursed under his breath and headed into his office. His computer was already powered on, displaying the same error logs he had been studying the night before. He was about to call the IT department when something on his screen made him pause. The error messages were different. Instead of the familiar cascade of system failures and data corruption warnings, there was a single, simple message. Client portal integration running successfully. No errors detected. David stared at the screen, certain he must be misreading something. He refreshed the diagnostics page, expecting the usual litany of problems to reappear. Instead, the system status showed green across the board. Every component that had been failing for years was now running smoothly. "This can't be right," he muttered, pulling up the system logs from the previous night. What he saw there made his blood run cold. Someone had accessed the system at 12:47 a.m., logged in using emergency maintenance credentials, and spent nearly 2 hours making changes to the core integration protocols. The changes were extensive, but surgical, targeting exactly the areas where the system had been failing. And according to the logs, whoever had made these changes had completely solved the problem. David's hands shook slightly as he scrolled through the modification logs. The code changes were elegant, efficient, and demonstrated a deep understanding of both the system architecture and the specific problems that had been plaguing it. This wasn't the work of someone randomly tinkering with the system. This was the work of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. But who could have done this? The emergency maintenance credentials were supposed to be restricted to senior IT staff, and none of them had reported working on the system overnight. David quickly called the IT security department. "This is David Chen. I need you to pull the security footage for the server room from last night, starting around midnight." "Right away, Mr. Chen. Is there a security breach?" "I don't know yet. Just get me that footage." While he waited, David continued to examine the code changes. The more he studied them, the more impressed he became. The solution was brilliant in its simplicity, addressing the race condition that had been causing data corruption by implementing a queue-based validation system that prevented multiple processes from accessing the same record simultaneously. It was exactly the kind of elegant fix that his expensive consultants had been unable to devise. 20 minutes later, Jennifer buzzed his intercom. "Mr. Chen, security is here with the footage you requested. Send them in." The security supervisor, a middle-aged man named Frank, entered with a laptop under his arm. "We've got the footage from last night, Mr. Chen, but I have to warn you, the cameras in the server room have been having intermittent issues. The quality isn't great." "Show me what you have." Frank opened his laptop and pulled up the security footage. The timestamp showed 12:45 a.m., and the grainy black and white image showed the server room in low-light conditions. David leaned forward, squinting at the screen. A figure appeared in the frame, moving carefully through the server room. The person was wearing dark clothing and moved with obvious familiarity with the space. As they approached the terminal, David caught a glimpse of their profile. His breath caught in his throat. "Can you enhance this image?" he asked, his voice tight. Frank adjusted some settings, and the image became slightly clearer. There was no mistaking it now. The person in the footage was Maya Rodriguez, the pregnant janitor he had mocked and dismissed just hours earlier. David watched in stunned silence as the footage showed Maya working at the terminal, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. She worked with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were doing, occasionally referring to a small notebook she had brought with her. "How long was she there?" David asked. Frank checked the timestamps. "About 2 hours and 15 minutes. She left around 3 a.m. David sat back in his chair, his mind reeling. The pregnant janitor who had tried to help him, whom he had ridiculed and dismissed, had snuck back into the building and single-handedly solved a problem that had cost his company millions of dollars and stumped teams of expert consultants for years. The full weight of his behavior the night before crashed down on him. He had been cruel and condescending to someone who had genuinely been trying to help, someone who had the knowledge and skill to solve his biggest problem. And she had gone ahead and solved it anyway, despite his treatment of her. "Sir?" Frank was looking at him with concern. "Should we file a report about the unauthorized access?" David was quiet for a long moment, staring at the frozen image of Maya on the screen. She looked determined, focused, completely absorbed in her work. This was a woman who knew her worth, even if he had been too blind and arrogant to see it. "No," he said finally. "No report, thank you, Frank. That will be all." After Frank left, David sat alone in his office, staring out at the Seattle skyline. The client portal that had been the bane of his existence for years was now running perfectly, thanks to a woman he had treated with nothing but contempt. The irony was not lost on him. In trying to prove that Maya had nothing valuable to offer, he had revealed his own ignorance and prejudice. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, the lead consultant. "Just ran the morning diagnostics. Whatever happened overnight, the system is running better than we've ever seen it. All the integration issues appear to be resolved. We need to meet ASAP to discuss how this happened." David looked at the message and realized that Maya had not only solved his technical problem, she had potentially saved him from a very difficult board meeting and possibly his job. The system failures had been putting increasing pressure on his leadership, and the board had been growing impatient with the lack of progress. But Maya had also put herself at tremendous risk. Unauthorized access to company systems was a serious offense, one that could result in criminal charges. If anyone else discovered what she had done, her attempt to help could destroy her life. David made a decision. He picked up his phone and called Jennifer. "I need you to get me the personnel file for Maya Rodriguez. She's one of the night cleaning staff." "Right away, Mr. Chen." As he waited, David looked once more at the system diagnostics. Everything was running smoothly, efficiently, perfectly. Maya had done in 2 hours what millions of dollars in consulting fees had failed to accomplish. And she had done it after he had humiliated her, dismissed her, and made it clear that he considered her opinions worthless. The memory of his behavior made him physically sick. He had always prided himself on being a fair leader, someone who valued talent and hard work, regardless of background. But last night, he had revealed a side of himself that he didn't like, a prejudice and arrogance that had blinded him to genuine brilliance. Jennifer appeared with Maya's file, and David opened it with growing amazement. Maya Rodriguez, age 28, computer science degree from the University of Washington. 2 years of experience as a software developer before joining the cleaning crew 3 years ago. Her previous employer had given her glowing recommendations, praising her problem-solving skills and technical expertise. She had been right there, working in his building for 3 years, with exactly the skills and knowledge needed to solve his biggest problem. And he had never bothered to look beyond her job title, never considered that someone pushing a cleaning cart might have something valuable to contribute. David closed the file and checked his watch. It was still early, and Maya's shift wouldn't start for another 12 hours. But he couldn't wait that long. He needed to find her, to apologize, and to make sure that her unauthorized access to the system didn't result in serious consequences for her. More than that, he needed to offer her the opportunity she deserved, the recognition that her skills and intelligence demanded. Maya Rodriguez had proven herself in the most dramatic way possible, and David Chen was determined to make sure she never had to push a cleaning cart again, unless she chose to. But first, he had to find a way to undo the damage his prejudice and arrogance had caused. He had to find a way to prove that he could see beyond his own assumptions and recognize talent wherever it came from. David picked up his phone and dialed Jennifer. "I need you to get me Maya Rodriguez's home address and clear my schedule for the morning. I have some apologizing to do." David Chen stood outside the modest apartment complex in the Beacon Hill neighborhood, his black Tesla looking distinctly out of place among the aging Honda Civics and weathered pickup trucks in the parking lot. The morning fog was just beginning to lift from the Seattle skyline, and he could feel his heart pounding as he approached Building C, Unit 247. He had spent the entire drive rehearsing what he would say to Maya, but now that he was here, every prepared speech seemed inadequate. How do you apologize for being so fundamentally wrong about someone? How do you acknowledge that your prejudice and arrogance had nearly cost you the solution to your biggest problem? The apartment building was clean, but clearly showing its age, with faded blue paint and concrete steps, worn smooth by countless footsteps. David climbed to the second floor, his expensive Italian shoes echoing in the narrow hallway. He found Unit 247 and stood there for a moment, gathering his courage. Before he could knock, the door opened, and a man emerged carrying a toolbox. He was tall and lean, with calloused hands and the kind of tan that came from working outdoors. His left leg was supported by a metal brace, and he moved with the careful gait of someone still recovering from a serious injury. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his tone polite but cautious. David realized this must be Carlos, Maya's husband. "I'm looking for Maya Rodriguez," David said. "I'm David Chen from Nexus Technologies." Carlos's expression immediately hardened. If this is about Maya's work schedule, she's never missed a shift. She's been putting in extra hours because she knows the baby's coming soon. "No, it's not about her schedule," David said quickly. "I actually need to speak with her about something that happened last night. Is she here?" Carlos studied David with suspicious eyes. "What happened last night?" "Maya came home around her usual time, maybe a little later." David hesitated. He couldn't exactly explain that Maya had hacked into the company's systems without potentially getting her into serious trouble. "It's about a technical matter, a problem at the office that she may have noticed." "Technical matter?" Carlos's eyebrows rose. "You mean her computer stuff?" Before David could respond, a voice called from inside the apartment. "Carlos, who's at the door?" Maya appeared behind her husband, wearing a simple blue dress that accommodated her pregnant belly. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she looked tired but alert. When she saw David, her face went pale. "Mr. Chen," she said, instinctively placing a protective hand on her stomach. "What are you doing here?" David looked between Maya and Carlos, both of whom were regarding him with wariness and confusion. "I need to talk to you about what happened last night, about the client portal system." Maya's eyes widened, and David saw fear flicker across her face. She knew that. He knew. Carlos looked between his wife and David, clearly sensing the tension. "What's this about, Maya?" "Carlos," Maya said softly, "could you give us a few minutes? Maybe check on Mrs. Patterson next door. She mentioned her kitchen faucet was acting up again." Carlos hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave his pregnant wife alone with this stranger who had appeared at their door, but after a moment he nodded. "I'll be right next door if you need me," he said, giving David a warning look before heading down the hallway. Maya stepped back to let David into the apartment. It was small, but immaculately clean, with furniture that was clearly second-hand but well-maintained. Family photos covered one wall, showing happier times when Carlos was healthy and working. A small desk in the corner held an aging laptop and several programming books with worn spines. "Please sit," Maya said, gesturing to the couch. Her voice was steady, but David could see the tension in her shoulders. David remained standing. "Maya, I know what you did last night." She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with a resigned expression. "I suppose the security cameras caught me." "They did, but that's not why I'm here." Maya looked confused. "Are you here to fire me? Because I understand that what I did was wrong, and I'm prepared to face the consequences. I couldn't stand knowing that I could fix something and not trying." David felt another wave of shame at her words. Even now, facing potential criminal charges, she was thinking about solving problems rather than protecting herself. "Maya, I'm not here to fire you. I'm here to apologize." She stared at him, clearly not expecting this response. "Apologize?" "For last night, for the way I treated you, the way I dismissed you, for being so arrogant and prejudiced that I couldn't see what was right in front of me." David ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration that had become habitual during sleepless nights. "You tried to help me, and I mocked you. I was cruel and condescending, and I was completely, utterly wrong." Maya sank slowly onto the couch, her hand supporting her belly. "You weren't wrong to be skeptical. I know how it must have looked." "No," David said firmly. "I was wrong. Not just skeptical, but cruel. And you proved it by solving a problem that has been costing my company millions of dollars for years, a problem that teams of expensive consultants couldn't fix." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the previous night's events hanging between them. "How did you know?" Maya asked finally. "About the race condition, I mean. The other developers never caught it." David leaned forward, genuinely curious. "That's what I want to understand. Help me see what they missed." Maya was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. The other consultants were looking at the symptoms, not the cause. They saw data corruption and system crashes, so they focused on database integrity and server capacity. But the real problem was in the timing of the validation processes. She moved to her laptop and opened it, pulling up a simple diagram she had sketched. When multiple users tried to update their profiles simultaneously, the system would start multiple validation processes for the same data. These processes would step on each other, creating inconsistencies that cascaded through the entire system. David studied the diagram, amazed at how clearly Maya had identified the core issue. But why didn't the other developers see this? Because they were thinking like enterprise developers, Maya explained. They assumed the problem had to be complex, requiring expensive hardware solutions or complete system rewrites. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. "And you fixed it by implementing a queue system." Maya nodded. "A simple queue that processes validation requests one at a time. It adds maybe a few milliseconds to each transaction, but it eliminates the race condition entirely." David shook his head in amazement. "Maya, do you realize what you've done? This system failure has been our biggest operational challenge for years. The board was considering replacing me if we couldn't solve it." "I didn't know it was that." "Serious?" Maya said quietly. "I just saw a problem that I knew how to fix." "Which brings me to why I'm really here," David said. "Maya, I want to offer you a job. A real job, using your actual skills." Maya's eyes widened. "What kind of job?" "Senior software developer initially. But given what you've shown me, I think you could advance quickly. Maybe lead developer within a year, principal engineer after that." David paused, studying her face. The starting salary would be $120,000, plus benefits, plus stock options. Maya stared at him in shock. $120,000. Mr. Chen, I make $18,000 a year cleaning offices. I know, and that's another injustice I want to correct. David leaned forward earnestly. Maya, you have a degree from the University of Washington, years of experience, and you just solved our biggest technical challenge. You should never have been cleaning offices in the first place. Tears began to form in Maya's eyes. I don't know what to say. This is more than I ever dreamed of. Say yes, David said simply. Say you'll come work for us. Say you'll let me prove that I can see past my own prejudices and recognize talent wherever it comes from. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What about my pregnancy? I'm due in 2 months. We have excellent maternity leave policies. 12 weeks paid, with the option to extend unpaid if you need more time. And we have on-site childcare, once you're ready to come back. On-site childcare? Maya's voice was barely a whisper. It's one of the benefits I'm most proud of, David said. We believe in supporting working parents. Maya was quiet for several minutes, clearly overwhelmed by the sudden change in her circumstances. Finally, she looked up at David with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. Why are you doing this? She asked. Is it just because of what I did last night? David considered the question carefully. Partly, yes. What you did proved that you have exactly the kind of innovative thinking and problem-solving skills we need. But it's also because I need to make this right. I need to prove to myself that I can be better than I was last night. And if I hadn't fixed the system, if I hadn't proven myself in such a dramatic way, David felt a stab of shame at the question because he knew the honest answer. I probably would have forgotten about our conversation entirely. I would have gone on thinking of you as just the cleaning lady, never bothering to learn about your background or your skills. At least you're honest, Maya said with a slight smile. I'm trying to be. Maya, I can't change how I behaved last night, but I can change how I behave going forward. And I can make sure that what happened to you never happens to anyone else at our company. Before Maya could respond, the apartment door opened and Carlos returned, his toolbox in hand. He looked between Maya and David, noting his wife's tears and emotional state. Everything okay here? He asked, his voice protective. Maya stood up slowly, her face radiant with a smile that transformed her entire appearance. Carlos, you're not going to believe this. Mr. Chen just offered me a job, a real job using my computer science degree. Carlos's expression shifted from suspicion to amazement. A job? What kind of job? A senior software developer, David said, extending his hand to Carlos, at a starting salary of $120,000. Carlos's toolbox slipped from his fingers and hit the floor with a loud clatter. $120,000? Plus benefits, stock options, and maternity leave, Maya added, laughing through her tears. Carlos looked stunned. But how? What happened? Maya and David exchanged a glance, and David realized they would need to come up with a version of events that didn't involve Maya's unauthorized access to the company's systems. Maya identified a critical problem with our computer systems, David said carefully, a problem that our other developers had missed. She demonstrated exceptional insight and technical skill. It wasn't exactly a lie, David reasoned. Maya had identified the problem, and she had demonstrated exceptional skill. The method by which she had proven her point was perhaps better, left unsaid. Carlos sat down heavily on the couch, still processing the news. Maya, this is incredible. This changes everything. I know, Maya said, her voice full of wonder. "I can hardly believe it myself." David watched the couple's joy and felt a complex mixture of emotions. He was genuinely happy for them, proud that he could offer Maya the opportunity she deserved. But he was also acutely aware that none of this would have happened if Maya hadn't taken an enormous risk to prove herself. How many other talented people had he overlooked? How many opportunities had his prejudices cost his company? "When would you want me to start?" Maya asked. "Well, given your condition, we should probably plan around your due date," David said. "How about you start next Monday? Work for a few weeks to get familiar with our systems, then take your maternity leave when the baby comes." "That sounds perfect," Maya said. "But Mr. Chen, there's something I need to tell you." David felt a moment of anxiety. "What is it?" "I'm going to need to give notice to the cleaning company. Janet, my supervisor, has been good to me. I want to make sure they have time to find a replacement." David smiled at this display of loyalty and professionalism. "Of course. Take whatever time you need to transition properly." "And," Maya continued, looking slightly embarrassed, "I'm going to need to buy some appropriate clothes. I haven't had to dress for an office job in years." "The company has a professional development budget," David said. "Consider new work clothes a business expense." Carlos stood up and extended his hand to David. "Mr. Chen, I don't know what my wife did to impress you, but thank you. This opportunity means everything to our family." David shook Carlos's hand, feeling the calluses that spoke of years of hard physical labor. "Your wife is exceptionally talented. I'm just glad I finally realized it." As David prepared to leave, Maya walked him to the door. "Mr. Chen, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Last night, when I tried to tell you about the system problem, you could have just ignored me or politely dismissed me. Why did you feel the need to be so harsh?" David paused in the doorway, considering her question. It was painful to examine his own behavior so closely, but Maya deserved an honest answer. "I think," he said slowly, "I was frustrated with my own inability to solve the problem, and when someone I perceived as beneath me suggested they could help, it threatened my sense of competence and authority, so I lashed out to protect my ego." Maya nodded thoughtfully. "And now I realize that good ideas can come from anyone, anywhere, and that my ego is far less important than solving problems and treating people with respect." "That's a valuable lesson," Maya said. "I hope you remember it when you're working with other people who might not fit your expectations." David met her gaze and saw not accusation but genuine hope that he would be better in the future. "I will remember it, I promise you that." As David drove back to the office, his mind was racing with the implications of what had just happened. In the space of 12 hours, he had gone from mocking a janitor to offering her a 6-figure job. The transformation felt surreal, but also profoundly right. He thought about Maya's question regarding his harsh behavior the night before. The truth was even more uncomfortable than what he had told her. He had been cruel, not just because she had threatened his ego, but because her position as a pregnant cleaning lady had made her seem like an easy target. He had felt safe being dismissive because he assumed she had no power to challenge him or make him face consequences for his behavior. It was a humbling realization about his own character, but also a motivating one. If he could change his perspective so dramatically about Maya, what other blind spots did he have? How many other talented people had he overlooked or undervalued? When David arrived at the office, he was surprised to find Marcus, the lead consultant, waiting in the lobby with 2 other members of his team. They looked puzzled and slightly anxious. "David," Marcus said, standing up as David approached, "we need to talk about what happened last night." "Of course," David said, his stomach tightening slightly. "Come up to my office." As they rode, "The elevator to the 42nd floor," Marcus continued. "We've been going over the system logs from last night, and frankly, we're baffled. Someone made modifications to the core integration protocols, and they're brilliant, absolutely brilliant." "Oh?" David tried to keep his voice neutral. "The solution is so elegant, so perfectly targeted to the specific problems we've been struggling with. Whoever did this has an incredibly deep understanding of both the system architecture and the underlying issues." They reached David's office and he gestured for the consultants to sit. "And you're wondering who made these changes?" "Exactly," said Sarah, one of Marcus's senior developers. "The modifications were made using emergency maintenance credentials, but none of our team was working last night. We checked with your IT department, and they're just as confused as we are." David sat down behind his desk, carefully considering his response. He needed to protect Maya while also addressing the consultant's concerns. "I had one of our developers take a look at the problem," he said finally. "Someone with a fresh perspective on the issues you've been working on." "Which developer?" Marcus asked. "We'd love to meet them, discuss their approach. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we've been looking for." "She's not available right now," David said. "Personal circumstances." Sarah leaned forward with interest. "I'd really like to know more about her background. This level of system analysis is extraordinary." David realized he was walking a fine line. The consultants were clearly impressed with Maya's work, but he couldn't reveal the circumstances under which she had made the modifications without potentially exposing her to legal consequences. "I'll see if I can arrange a meeting once she's available," David said diplomatically. "In the meantime, I assume this resolves the integration issues we've been experiencing?" "Completely," Marcus said, his voice still full of amazement. "The system has been running flawlessly since the modifications were made. We're estimating this solution will save your company several $1 million annually in lost revenue and system maintenance costs." "Several million?" David repeated, thinking about Maya cleaning offices for $18,000 a year. "At least," Sarah confirmed. "The data corruption issues were costing you customers every quarter, plus the expense of constant troubleshooting and emergency fixes. This solution eliminates all of that." After the consultants left, David sat alone in his office, staring out at the Seattle skyline. Maya's fix wasn't just elegant and effective, it was worth millions of dollars to his company. And she had implemented it for free, as an act of professional pride and problem-solving passion, despite being treated with cruelty and dismissal. The more David thought about it, the more he realized that offering Maya a senior developer position, while generous, might not be enough. Her insight and skills were clearly at a much higher level than he had initially recognized. He picked up his phone and called Jennifer. "I need you to research compensation packages for principal engineers and senior technical architects at comparable companies. And I want to know what our budget is for hiring at the director level." "Director level?" Jennifer sounded surprised. "For a new hire?" "For someone who just saved us several $1 million, David said. "And Jennifer, I want those numbers by this afternoon." As David waited for the compensation research, he found himself thinking about Maya's husband Carlos and his injury. Maya had mentioned that Carlos was recovering from a construction accident that had left him unable to work. David wondered if there might be opportunities for Carlos at Nexus as well. The company was always in need of skilled maintenance and facilities personnel, and Carlos clearly had the work ethic and reliability that the Rodriguez family demonstrated. But more than that, David was beginning to formulate a larger plan. Maya's story had opened his eyes to how much talent might be overlooked simply because people were in the wrong jobs or the wrong circumstances. How many other brilliant minds were out there, underemployed and undervalued because of assumptions and prejudices like the ones he had displayed. What if Nexus could become a company that actively sought out overlooked talent? What if they could create programs to identify and develop people who had the skills and intelligence to contribute, but lacked the traditional credentials or circumstances that usually led to opportunities? David's phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. Compensation research ready. Principal engineer average, 180K, 220K. Senior technical architect, 220K, 280K. Director of engineering, 300K, 400K. David stared at the numbers, then made a decision. He picked up his phone and called Maya. Hello? Her voice sounded slightly out of breath. Maya, it's David Chen. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. No, not at all. I was just telling my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, about the job offer. She's been so worried about us since Carlos got hurt. Maya, I need to revise our earlier conversation. I've been thinking about what you've accomplished, and I believe I undervalued your contribution. There was a pause. What do you mean? The consultants came to see me this morning. They estimate that your solution will save the company several $1 million annually. That's not the work of a senior developer. That's the work of a principal engineer or technical architect. Mr. Chen, I don't understand. I want to offer you a position as Director of Technical Innovation at a salary of $350,000, plus a substantial stock package and performance bonuses. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long that David wondered if the call had been dropped. Maya, are you there? I'm here, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Did you just say $350,000? I did. Maya, what you've done proves that you have exceptional insight and problem-solving abilities. I want you to lead a new initiative to identify and solve the kind of overlooked technical challenges that cost companies millions of dollars. I don't know what to say, Maya said, and David could hear tears in her voice. Say yes, David repeated his earlier words. And Maya, I have another question for you. Would Carlos be interested in a facilities management position? We're always looking for skilled maintenance personnel, and given his construction background, he might be a good fit. This time the silence was even longer. Mr. Chen, Maya said finally, are you offering my husband a job too? If he's interested. The position would pay about $60,000 to start, with full benefits and opportunities for advancement. Maya began to cry, and David could hear her trying to compose herself. I'm sorry, this morning we were worried about paying for the baby's medical bills, and now you're offering us both jobs that would completely change our lives. Maya, you changed my life last night. You opened my eyes to my own prejudices and showed me what real talent looks like. This is me trying to be worthy of that lesson. After David ended the call, he sat back in his chair and smiled for the first time in weeks. The client portal was fixed. Maya Rodriguez was about to become one of his most valuable employees, and he had learned something important about himself and the kind of leader he wanted to be. But as satisfying as this resolution felt, David knew it was only the beginning. Maya's story had revealed systemic problems in how talent was recognized and valued, not just at Nexus, but in the industry as a whole. If he was serious about being a better leader and building a better company, he had a lot more work to do. His phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, board meeting in 30 minutes. For the first time in months, David was actually looking forward to it. He had good news to share. A success story that would impress the board and secure his position as CEO. But more importantly, he had a story about learning to see beyond his own assumptions, about recognizing talent in unexpected places, and about the importance of treating every person with respect and dignity, regardless of their current circumstances. It was a story he was proud to tell, and a lesson he would never forget. 3 weeks after Maya Rodriguez had started her new position as Director of Technical Innovation, the transformation at Nexus Technologies was already becoming apparent to everyone who worked there. The executive floor, once a realm of hushed conversations and careful politeness, had taken on a different energy entirely. Maya had chosen to keep her office on the same floor where she used to clean, a decision that had raised eyebrows among some of the senior staff, but had sent a powerful message throughout the company. Her office door remained open most of the day, and employees from every department had begun stopping by with technical challenges, innovative ideas, and problems they had been afraid to voice before. David Chen found himself walking past Maya's office multiple times each day, not because he needed to check on her work, but because the sight of her collaborative approach to leadership fascinated him. She had a unique ability to make everyone feel heard, from the newest intern to the most senior engineer. Her pregnant belly had become more prominent over the past weeks, but her energy and enthusiasm seemed to grow stronger each day. On this particular Wednesday morning, David was reviewing quarterly reports when Jennifer buzzed his intercom with an unusual request. "Mr. Chen, there's a delegation here from Morrison Financial. They're asking to meet with you about something they call an urgent competitive intelligence matter." David frowned. Morrison Financial was one of their biggest competitors, a company that had been trying to poach Nexus clients for years. "Did they say what this is about?" "They mentioned your recent system improvements and asked specifically about your new Director of Technical Innovation." David's stomach tightened. Maya's hiring had been handled quietly, with minimal external publicity, but the dramatic improvement in Nexus's client portal had not gone unnoticed in the industry. Word was spreading that Nexus had solved a problem that had plagued them for years, and competitors were beginning to ask questions. "Send them to conference room B," David said. "I'll be there in 5 minutes." As David made his way to the meeting, he wondered what Morrison Financial could possibly want. Their CEO, Richard Morrison, was known for his aggressive business tactics and his willingness to use any advantage to undermine competitors. David entered the conference room to find 3 people waiting for him. Richard Morrison himself, a tall man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive suit, sat at the head of the table. Beside him were 2 people David didn't recognize, but who had the look of corporate lawyers. "David," Richard said, standing to shake hands. "Thank you for seeing us on short notice." "Richard, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Richard smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. "We understand you've made some significant improvements to your client portal recently, solved some long-standing technical issues. We're always working to improve our systems," David replied carefully. "Of course. And we understand you've hired someone new to spearhead these improvements, Maya Rodriguez." David felt a chill run down his spine. "We've made several recent hires. What's your interest in our staffing decisions?" One of the lawyers, a sharp-featured woman with steel gray hair, leaned forward. "Mr. Chen, we represent several companies that have concerns about the methods used to achieve these improvements." "What kind of concerns?" Richard picked up a thick folder from the table and slid it across to David. "We've done some research into Ms. Rodriguez's background. Quite interesting reading." David opened the folder with growing dread. Inside were copies of Maya's employment records, her educational transcripts, and detailed timelines of her work. History. But what made his blood run cold were the security camera photos from the night Maya had accessed the system. "These photographs were taken from your building's security system," the lawyer continued. "They show Ms. Rodriguez accessing computer terminals in your server room at approximately 1 a.m. 3 weeks ago." David looked up from the folder, his mind racing. How did you get these images? That's not important, Richard said smoothly. What's important is what they represent. Industrial espionage, unauthorized access to computer systems, potentially criminal behavior. That's ridiculous, David said, though his voice lacked conviction. Is it? The second lawyer, a younger man with thick glasses, spoke for the first time. According to our investigation, Ms. Rodriguez was employed as a janitor at the time these photographs were taken. She had no authorization to access your computer systems, yet she spent over 2 hours making modifications to your core software. David felt trapped. Everything they were saying was technically true, even if their interpretation was completely wrong. Furthermore, the woman lawyer continued, our analysis suggests that these unauthorized modifications coincided exactly with the resolution of your system problems. Problems that had reportedly cost your company millions of dollars over several years. Richard leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying David's discomfort. So either Ms. Rodriguez committed a serious crime by hacking into your systems, or you knowingly hired someone to commit industrial espionage. Either way, it's a problem. What do you want? David asked bluntly. Transparency, Richard said. Our clients deserve to know if their competitor is gaining advantages through illegal means. If Ms. Rodriguez's actions were unauthorized, we believe criminal charges are warranted. If they were authorized, we want to understand the nature of your relationship with her prior to her employment. David stared at the photos of Maya working intently at the computer terminal. In the black and white images, she looked determined and focused, clearly someone who knew exactly what she was doing. To an outsider, it would indeed look like corporate espionage. I need time to review this with our legal team, David said finally. Of course, Richard said, standing up. But David, understand that this information is already circulating in certain circles. Questions are being asked about Nexus's recent improvements and the methods used to achieve them. It would be better for everyone if this matter were resolved quickly and transparently. After the Morrison financial delegation left, David sat alone in the conference room, staring at the folder of evidence. Everything in it was factually accurate, but it painted a picture that was completely divorced from reality. Maya wasn't a corporate spy or a criminal. She was a brilliant engineer who had been trapped in the wrong job and had taken a risk to prove her worth. But explaining that to the authorities or to the court of public opinion would be nearly impossible. The optics were terrible. A pregnant janitor secretly accessing computer systems in the middle of the night, making unauthorized changes worth millions of dollars, then suddenly being promoted to a high-level executive position. David's phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Can you stop by my office when you have a moment? I have some ideas about the Henderson project that I'd like to discuss. David looked at the message and felt a wave of guilt. Maya had no idea that her past actions were about to catch up with her, potentially destroying not just her new career, but her entire future. He made his way to Maya's office, where he found her at her standing desk, one hand on her lower back for support, reviewing architectural diagrams on her computer screen. Her face lit up when she saw him. David, perfect. Timing. I've been looking at the Henderson project specifications, and I think we're overcomplicating the data flow architecture. If we simplify the validation processes and implement a more streamlined approach to user authentication, we could probably cut development time by 30%. David tried to focus on what she was saying, but all he could think about were the security camera photos in Richard Morrison's folder. Maya, he said, we need to talk about something else first. She must have heard the seriousness in his tone because her expression immediately shifted to concern. What's wrong? David closed her office door and sat down across from her desk. Maya, I just had a meeting with some people from Morrison Financial. They know about what happened the night you fixed the client portal. Maya's face went pale. What do you mean they know? They have security camera footage of you. In the server room. They're calling it industrial espionage. Maya sank into her chair, one hand instinctively moving to her belly. Oh God, are they going to press charges? I don't know yet, but Maya, this could be serious. Unauthorized access to computer systems is a federal crime. Even though your intentions were good, even though you solved our problem, the law doesn't necessarily care about intentions. Maya was quiet for a long moment, staring out her window at the Seattle skyline. When she spoke, her voice was steady but sad. I knew this might happen eventually. I knew when I made the decision to access the system that I was taking a huge risk. I couldn't stand knowing that I could help and not trying. Maya, we're going to fight this. I'm not going to let them destroy your life over something that benefited everyone. She shook her head. David, you can't protect me from this. What I did was technically illegal, regardless of the outcome. And now that I'm pregnant, now that I have this job, I have too much to lose. What are you saying? Maya took a deep breath. I'm saying that maybe I should resign. If I'm not working here anymore, if there's no appearance of benefit from my actions, maybe this will just go away. Absolutely not, David said firmly. Maya, you earned this position. You've already proven your value to this company in ways that go far beyond that one night. I'm not going to let you sacrifice your career because some competitor wants to play dirty. But what if they're right? What if what I did really was criminal? David leaned forward, meeting her eyes. Maya, let me ask you something. When you accessed the system that night, what were you thinking about? I was thinking about the problem you were facing, about how frustrated you seemed, how much this issue was costing the company. I was thinking about proving that I could contribute something valuable. Were you thinking about stealing proprietary information, about sabotaging our systems, about gaining some kind of competitive advantage for another company? Of course not. I just wanted to fix the problem. Then you're not a criminal, David said. You're an engineer who saw a problem and couldn't resist solving it. Yes, your methods were unconventional and technically unauthorized, but your motives were pure and your results were extraordinary. Maya smiled weakly. I don't think a judge would see it that way. Maybe not, but I'm going to make sure we never have to find out. David spent the rest of the day in emergency meetings with Nexus's legal team, trying to understand their options and exposure. The company's general counsel, a sharp woman named Patricia Huang, was blunt in her assessment. Technically, Morrison Financial is right, Patricia said, reviewing the evidence folder. Ms. Rodriguez did access computer systems without authorization. That's a violation of federal computer fraud statutes, regardless of her intentions or the beneficial outcome. But she was already an employee of the company, David argued. She was cleaning the offices. She had legitimate access to the building. Physical access to the building doesn't grant authorization to access computer systems, Patricia replied, and her employment as a janitor actually makes this worse, not better. It suggests she used her position to gain access for unauthorized purposes. David felt frustrated. So what are our options? Limited. We could argue that the access was implicitly authorized as part of her employment duties, but that's a stretch, given her job description. We could claim that the company suffered no damages, but that's complicated by the fact that she was subsequently promoted and given a significant salary increase. What about the fact that she solved a multi-million-dollar problem? Patricia sighed. That's actually another complication. The dramatic improvement in her circumstances following the unauthorized access creates an appearance of quid pro quo. It looks like she was rewarded for illegal activity. David rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. So you're saying we can't protect her? I'm saying it's going to be very difficult. Our best option might be to distance the company from her actions, claim they were entirely unauthorized and unknown to management until after the fact. That would mean throwing Maya under the bus. It would mean protecting the company and potentially limiting her exposure as well. If we claim her actions were entirely rogue, it removes the appearance of corporate conspiracy. David stood up abruptly. No, absolutely not. Maya Rodriguez is one of the most talented engineers I've ever worked with. She took a risk to help this company, and I'm not going to abandon her now. Patricia looked at him with concern. David, I understand your feelings, but you need to think about this rationally. If Morrison Financial decides to pursue this aggressively, they could bring criminal charges, civil lawsuits, regulatory investigations. This could destroy not just Maya, but the entire company. Then we need to find another way. David left the legal meeting feeling more determined than ever to protect Maya, but with no clear path forward. The afternoon was wearing on, and he knew that news of the investigation would probably leak soon. In the technology industry, gossip traveled fast, and Morrison Financial wasn't known for keeping quiet about their competitive advantages. As he walked past Maya's office, he saw her packing files into boxes. His heart sank. Maya, what are you doing? She looked up with red-rimmed eyes. I've been thinking about what you said about protecting the company. I think the best thing I can do is resign and distance myself from Nexus before this gets any worse. We talked about this. I'm not going to let you sacrifice your career. David, this isn't just about my career anymore. If Morrison Financial pursues criminal charges, I could go to prison. My baby could be born while I'm in jail. Tears began flowing down her cheeks. I can't risk that. Carlos and I talked about it, and we agree that I need to step down. David felt a surge of anger, not at Maya, but at the situation, at Morrison Financial, at his own past behavior that had led to this crisis. Maya, Morrison Financial isn't interested in justice. They're trying to neutralize a competitive threat by destroying you personally. I know that, but knowing it doesn't change the legal reality. David watched Maya continue packing, feeling helpless and furious. Everything about this situation was wrong. Maya had used her skills to solve a genuine problem, had proven herself to be exactly the kind of innovative thinker that every technology company claimed to want. And now she was being destroyed by the very industry that should have been celebrating her. An idea began forming in David's mind, risky and unconventional, but potentially powerful. Maya, before you make any final decisions, I want you to consider something. She looked up from her packing. What? What if we went public with the whole story? What if we told the truth about what happened, about who you are and what you accomplished? David, that would make everything worse. The more attention this gets, the more pressure there will be for criminal charges. Maybe, or maybe it would show the world what really happened. Maybe it would demonstrate that this is about talent and innovation, not crime and espionage. Maya shook her head. It's too risky. Maya, what's risky is letting Morrison Financial control the narrative. Right now, they're painting you as a criminal. But what if we showed people the real story? What if we showed them a brilliant engineer who was trapped in the wrong job, who saw a problem and couldn't resist fixing it? And then what? Even if people believe the story, it doesn't change the legal issues. David sat down across from her. Maya, do you trust me? She met his eyes, and despite everything that had happened, despite the fear and uncertainty, she nodded. Yes. Then give me 24 hours. Don't resign, don't make any statements, don't do anything. Just give me one day to try something. Maya was quiet for a long moment, clearly torn between hope and pragmatism. Finally, she nodded. 1 day. But David, if this backfires, if it makes things worse for me or for the company, I'll never forgive myself. "It won't," David said, though he had no idea if that was true. "Maya, you changed my life when you showed me what real talent looks like. Now let me try to change yours." That evening, David worked late into the night on something he had never done before, writing a public statement that would either save Maya's career or destroy his own. He wrote about his own prejudices, about the night he had dismissed Maya's offer to help, about the unauthorized access that had solved their biggest technical challenge. But most importantly, he wrote about what Maya's story meant for the technology industry as a whole. How many brilliant minds were being overlooked because they didn't fit traditional expectations? How many innovative solutions were being missed because companies were too rigid in their thinking about where talent could be found? As David worked on the statement, he realized that this was about more than just protecting Maya. This was about the kind of industry and the kind of leader he wanted to be. This was about standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult and risky. By morning, David had crafted a statement that told the complete truth about Maya's story. It was vulnerable, honest, and potentially devastating to his own reputation. But it was also, he believed, the right thing to do. At 8 a.m., David called an emergency press conference. By noon, Maya's story would be front-page news across the technology industry. The question was whether the truth would be enough to protect her, or whether it would simply make her a more visible target for those who wanted to destroy her. As David prepared to face the media, he thought about Maya at home with Carlos, probably watching the news and wondering if she had made a terrible mistake in trusting him. He hoped that by the end of the day, she would understand that some battles were worth fighting and some principles were worth the risk. The technology industry was about to learn about Maya Rodriguez, and David Chen was determined to make sure they learned the right lessons from her extraordinary story. The conference room at Nexus Technologies had never hosted a press conference before. David Chen stood at the podium, looking out at a sea of reporters, cameras, and recording devices. Representatives from major technology publications, business journals, and even national news outlets had gathered to hear what the CEO of Nexus Technologies had to say about the allegations swirling around his company. Maya Rodriguez sat in the front row, her hands folded protectively over her belly. Carlos was beside her, his face tense with worry. They had arrived just minutes before the conference began, after David had called to insist that Maya be present to tell her own story. David cleared his throat and began to speak. 3 weeks ago, I was working late in my office, frustrated by a technical problem that had been costing our company millions of dollars for years. A member of our cleaning staff approached me and offered to help. Her name was Maya Rodriguez, and I laughed at her suggestion. I dismissed her cruelly and arrogantly, assuming that someone in her position couldn't possibly understand our complex technical challenges. The room was silent except for the soft clicking of camera shutters and the scratch of pens on paper. What I didn't know was that Maya Rodriguez holds a computer science degree from the University of Washington and had worked as a software developer before circumstances led her to take a cleaning position to support her family. What I also didn't know was that she had already identified the exact cause of our technical problems and knew how to fix them. David paused, looking directly at Maya before continuing. That night, after I had humiliated her and made it clear that her expertise was unwelcome, Maya Rodriguez made a decision that would change both of our lives. She returned to our building, after hours and, without authorization, accessed our computer systems to implement the solution she knew would work. A murmur ran through the crowd of reporters. David could see them frantically taking notes, probably already crafting headlines, about corporate espionage and unauthorized system access. Her solution was brilliant, elegant, and completely effective. In 2 hours, working alone, she solved a problem that teams of expensive consultants had been unable to resolve in years. Our system has been running flawlessly ever since. David took a breath before delivering the most important part of his statement. Maya Rodriguez is not a criminal. She is not a corporate spy. She's a brilliant engineer who saw a problem and couldn't resist solving it, even after being treated with disrespect and dismissal. Her actions were technically unauthorized, but they were motivated by professional pride and a genuine desire to help. The only crime here is how long it took me to recognize her talent and value. A reporter in the front row raised her hand. Mr. Chen, are you saying that you condone unauthorized access to computer systems? I'm saying that context matters. Intent matters. Results matter. Maya Rodriguez didn't access our systems to steal information or cause damage. She accessed them to fix a critical problem that was hurting our company and our customers. The fact that she was working as a janitor at the time doesn't change the brilliance of her solution or the value of her contribution. Another reporter called out, "What about the allegations from Morrison Financial regarding industrial espionage?" David's expression hardened. Morrison Financial is trying to destroy a talented engineer because they're threatened by our improved competitive position. They're using technically accurate facts to paint a completely false picture of what actually happened. This isn't about justice or security, it's about eliminating a competitive threat by any means necessary. Mr. Chen, a third reporter asked, given the legal implications of unauthorized system access, how do you justify promoting Ms. Rodriguez to a senior position? I promoted Maya Rodriguez because she earned it, because she demonstrated exactly the kind of innovative thinking and problem-solving ability that every technology company claims to value. Because she proved that talent and intelligence can be found in unexpected places. And because I was finally smart enough to recognize what had been in front of me all along. David gestured toward Maya. I'd like Maya to speak for herself about her actions and motivations. Maya stood slowly, her pregnancy making the movement deliberate. She approached the podium with dignity, despite the circumstances that had brought her there. My name is Maya Rodriguez, she began, her voice clear and steady. 3 weeks ago, I was cleaning offices at night to support my family while my husband recovered from a work injury. I have a computer science degree, but circumstances had led me away from that career path. She paused, one hand resting on the podium for support. When I saw the technical problems that Mr. Chen was facing, I recognized them immediately. I knew I could help, but I also knew that my current position meant my expertise would be dismissed. After Mr. Chen made it clear that my input wasn't welcome, I had a choice. I could accept that decision and walk away, or I could prove that I had something valuable to contribute. Maya looked directly into the cameras. I chose to prove myself. Yes, I accessed computer systems without explicit authorization. Yes, I technically violated company policy. But I did it because I'm an engineer, and engineers solve problems. I saw a problem that was hurting the company and its customers, and I knew how to fix it. Ms. Rodriguez, a reporter called out, do you acknowledge that your actions were illegal? Maya took a deep breath. I acknowledge that my actions were unauthorized and potentially illegal. But I also know that intent matters, that context matters, and that the result of my actions was entirely positive. I didn't steal anything, I didn't damage anything, and I didn't benefit personally from what I did. I simply used my skills to solve a problem. Now, what would you say to other employees who might think unauthorized system access is acceptable if the intentions are good? I would say that every situation is unique and that there are proper channels for most concerns. What I did was an extreme action in an extreme situation. I don't recommend it as a general course of action. But I also don't regret using my skills to help when I knew I could make a difference. After the press conference, David and Maya retreated to his office to await the public reaction. The story was already appearing on technology blogs and news sites, with headlines ranging from "Pregnant Janitor Solves Multi-Million-Dollar Tech Problem" to "CEO Admits Hiring Alleged Hacker." "I hope I did the right thing," Maya said, settling into a chair with obvious relief at being off her feet. "You did," David assured her. "You told the truth, and you told it with dignity. Whatever happens next, people will understand what really occurred." David's phone began ringing almost immediately. The first call was from Patricia Huang, the company's general counsel. "David, what the hell were you thinking?" Patricia's voice was sharp with anger. "You just admitted to a room full of reporters that we knowingly hired someone who committed computer crimes." "I admitted that we hired someone whose talents we had previously overlooked," David replied calmly. "That's not how the prosecutors are going to see it. You may have just made this situation 10 times worse." The second call was from a board member, equally upset about the public statement. The third was from a technology journalist wanting additional comment. By the end of the hour, David had fielded calls from lawyers, reporters, board members, and industry analysts. But then something unexpected began to happen. David's assistant Jennifer buzzed the intercom with a different kind of call. "Mr. Chen, I have Dr. Sarah Kim from Stanford on the line. She says she wants to offer Ms. Rodriguez a position in their computer science graduate program." Maya looked up in surprise. "Graduate program?" "She says she's been following the story and is impressed by both your technical skills and your courage. She wants to discuss a full scholarship for doctoral studies in artificial intelligence." The next call was from a venture capital firm in Silicon Valley offering to fund a startup if Maya was interested in becoming an entrepreneur. The call after that was from another technology company offering a competing job opportunity at an even higher salary than Nexus had provided. As the afternoon wore on, it became clear that public opinion was shifting in Maya's favor. Social media was filled with stories from other people who had been overlooked or underestimated in their careers. Technology workers were sharing experiences of brilliant colleagues who had been dismissed because they didn't fit traditional expectations. The hashtag Maya Rodriguez began trending, with messages of support and admiration for both her technical skills and her courage in speaking out. Several prominent female engineers posted about their own experiences with discrimination and the importance of recognizing talent regardless of circumstances. More importantly, legal experts began weighing in on the case, with many arguing that Maya's actions didn't meet the legal standard for criminal computer fraud. Her access to the building, her benign intent, the lack of damage or theft, and the entirely positive outcome all worked in her favor from a legal perspective. By evening, Morrison Financial's aggressive stance was beginning to backfire. Technology industry leaders were criticizing the company for trying to destroy an individual rather than competing fairly in the marketplace. Several major clients publicly questioned Morrison's ethics and business practices. Richard Morrison himself was forced to hold his own press conference, where he appeared defensive and out of touch as he tried to explain why his company was pursuing criminal charges against a pregnant woman who had solved a technical problem. "This isn't about personal circumstances," Morrison said stiffly. "This is about maintaining security standards and legal compliance in the technology industry." But reporters pressed him on why his company had obtained security footage from a competitor and why they were pursuing charges against someone whose actions had caused no harm to anyone. "Are you concerned that your aggressive tactics here might be seen as an attempt to intimidate talented engineers who might pose competitive threats?" one reporter asked. Morrison's discomfort was obvious. "We simply believe that unauthorized system access should have consequences, regardless of the outcome." The press conference was widely seen as a public relations disaster for Morrison Financial. Within hours, the company's stock price began to decline as investors questioned the leadership's judgment and ethics. Meanwhile, Maya received a call that changed everything. It was from the Seattle District Attorney's Office. Ms. Rodriguez, this is Assistant District Attorney Maria Santos. I've been reviewing the materials provided by Morrison Financial regarding the alleged computer crimes at Nexus Technologies. Maya's heart raced. Yes, indeed. After extensive review and consultation with computer crime specialists, we've determined that your actions don't meet the threshold for criminal prosecution. The lack of malicious intent, the absence of any damage or theft, and the entirely beneficial outcome all weigh heavily in your favor. Maya sat down heavily, tears of relief streaming down her face. What does that mean exactly? It means we won't be filing charges. It means this matter is closed from a criminal perspective. It means you can move forward with your life and career without the threat of prosecution hanging over you. When Maya shared the news with David, his relief was as profound as her own. They had gambled everything on the power of truth and transparency, and it had paid off. Maya, David said, I owe you an apology that goes far beyond what happened that night in my office. I owe you an apology for the years you spent cleaning our offices while we failed to recognize what you could contribute. I owe you an apology for an industry that too often judges talent by appearance rather than ability. You don't owe me anything, Maya replied. You gave me an opportunity when you could have thrown me under the bus. You stood up for me when it would have been easier to distance yourself from the situation. I gave you an opportunity you had already earned. The real question is, what do you want to do next? Maya smiled, placing her hand on her belly. First, I want to have this baby and spend some time learning how to be a mother. But after that, I want to build something that ensures this never happens to anyone else. What do you mean? I want to create programs that identify overlooked talent, that give people opportunities to prove themselves regardless of their current circumstances. I want to build bridges between potential and opportunity. David nodded thoughtfully. That sounds like exactly the kind of innovation our industry needs. 6 months later, Maya Rodriguez gave birth to a healthy baby girl named Sophia. She took her maternity leave as planned, but she didn't stay away from work entirely. From her home office, she began developing what would become the Nexus Talent Initiative, a program designed to identify and develop overlooked technical talent in unconventional places. The program, partnerships with community colleges, job training centers, and community organizations to find people with technical aptitude who had never had opportunities to develop their skills. It provided mentorship, training, and pathways to employment for people from all backgrounds and circumstances. Maya's story had sparked a movement in the technology industry. Companies across the country began examining their own hiring practices and looking for talent in places they had previously ignored. The idea that brilliance could be found anywhere, in anyone, became a rallying cry for a more inclusive and innovative industry. When Maya returned to work after her maternity leave, she found her office had been moved to a larger space to accommodate the growing talent initiative team. Sophia's crib sat in the corner, and Maya often worked with her daughter nearby, a visible reminder that talent and dedication could coexist with family responsibilities. David Chen had learned the most important lesson of his career, that the best leaders don't just recognize talent when it's presented in familiar packages, but actively seek it out in unexpected places. Maya Rodriguez had taught him that innovation often comes from fresh perspectives and that the most valuable insights can come from those who have been overlooked by traditional systems. The client portal that Maya had fixed continued to run flawlessly, saving Nexus millions of dollars annually. But more importantly, her story had changed the company's culture and approach to talent development. Nexus became known as a place where people could grow and contribute regardless of their backgrounds, and the company's innovation accelerated as a result. Morrison Financial never recovered from the public relations disaster of their attack on Maya. Richard Morrison was eventually forced to resign, and the company struggled to rebuild its reputation and client base. Maya Rodriguez became a sought-after speaker and consultant, sharing her story and advocating for more inclusive practices in the technology industry. But she never forgot where she came from, and she never stopped working to ensure that other, talented people wouldn't have to clean offices at night while their potential went unrecognized. Her daughter Sophia would grow up in a world where her mother's story had become legend, where a pregnant janitor's refusal to accept dismissal had changed an entire industry's understanding of where talent could be found and how it should be valued. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.